Oracle's pressure on customers to update their licensing agreements, software integration in ERP implementations, and why change management is overrated. Those are just a few of the things we're going to talk about here today in episode 174 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 174. My name is Eric Kimberling, and this is the podcast that has everything to do with digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy aspects of transformation. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And joining me here today as my co-host, again, as always, is Darian Fiakuski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for today's episode.
Me too. I'm excited for today's show. Got a new guest on the show that's never been on before. We've got some great topics we're going to cover here today. First of all, we're going to open up with some questions and answers from the audience, from questions we've gotten on social media in recent days. And then we're going to get into some of our noteworthy or newsworthy topics. We're going to talk about some news related to Oracle's pressures to their customers to update their licensing agreements and what that means for Oracle customers. We'll also talk about SAP SuccessFactors and some of the new features they've added to SuccessFactors or that they've just announced here recently for SuccessFactors. And then later in the show, we're going to have Mark Simon on the show. He's the head of strategy at a company called Celigo, which is an integration platform as a service company. And he's going to be on the show with me talking about software integration in ERP implementations and digital transformations in general, and what it is you need to know about software integration and how you should go about the whole process of looking for a platform as a service potentially, or an integration platform as a service. So we're going to talk about software integration in that conversation. And then later in the show, we'll talk about why change management is overrated. So be sure to stick around for that. So before we get to our guest and our other topics here today, though, what audience questions do you have for us here today, Darian?
Yeah, so our first one actually comes from TikTok, and it was from a clip that explained your consulting journey, but this particular clip was talking about issues that you have seen in the consulting world. This comment says, can you give some real-life examples of these types of scenarios? Which software vendors and what examples type of relationships do you have to build up to build a consistent business?
Yeah, well, first of all, I guess I would say that I think what the person's alluding to is the fact that the way the ERP consulting space was built is that it was built on software vendors sort of being the center of the universe, and then ERP consultants promoting and aligning with those software vendors. So in other words, most ERP consultants are either getting commissioned on recommending software vendors, and or they're building a whole practice around that one software vendor. And in exchange, the software vendor supports that consulting firm, and they typically will feed leads to it and provide marketing support, business development support, all that stuff. So if you're going to start a consulting practice, probably the fastest way to do it would be to pick a software vendor and align with that vendor and say, hey, we're going to build a practice around a certain industry or geography based on this one platform, which is fine. That's what most consultants do, but the problem with that is that it creates a bias in the industry, and now there's sort of a lack of independent tech agnostic advisors that understand the entire ecosystem or the entire spectrum of platforms and systems that are out there, and instead they're all trying to promote their one product, or maybe it's one or two products that they represent. So I'd say most software vendors do it. I think the ones that are the best at it as far as creating that ecosystem of consultants that align with their interest and promote their products, it's going to be, SAP is really good at it. Microsoft, almost all of Microsoft sales happens through consultants and their resellers. Oracle, They all do it. I mean, all the big software vendors have their ecosystem of consultants that they support, and in exchange, those consultants support them.
Yeah, that's super interesting. A question that I have from that is there's something that the clients then need to be aware of when working with these consulting firms that are partnered with softwares, particularly like are they going to have a blind eye to maybe some problems that the customer could face when they implement the software?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. The blind eye and the blind spot, as far as what the risks are, is the big one. Because if you think about it, if your bias and your best interest is for, if I'm a consultant and I'm biased, my best interest is to recommend vendor A, and I'm going to make more money if I recommend vendor A. I've built a whole team of people that only understand and support vendor A. It's in my best interest to make sure I make vendor A look good, and that I help a client see all the positives of vendor A rather than shining a light on things that'll be risks or challenges. And to me, that's really important. Even if vendor A is the right option for a client, you need to understand what those risks and challenges are. But the problem is we create these ecosystems, and when I say we, I don't mean us, because third stage is independent, but we as an industry, software vendors in particular, create this whole echo chamber of how great the software is and how it's a silver bullet, it's an easy button, it's everything we could ever dream of in the world of technology, and we don't, as customers, we don't see the dark side. We don't see what the risks are, what the deficiencies are, where the gaps are, and if we don't see that, then it's sort of like the Titanic situation where you don't see below the tip of the iceberg. And so you really need to understand that so you can navigate it. And so, yes, it creates a blind eye. It also creates a lot of blind spots and lack of understanding and awareness of what the risks really are.
Yeah, that's super interesting, specifically in the consulting world, that whole part of it. And yeah, but our next question of the day is, I know senior managers that can't even spell ERP. How can we encourage them to educate themselves when many think that admitting a lack of knowledge is displaying a weakness?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I'd say, first of all, you don't want to tell people that they lack knowledge and that they need to be trained, but you can take sort of a Trojan horse approach to educating and training. That's something we do with our clients a lot. Is we'll have project team members, or maybe it's an executive sponsor who knows that their peers or others on their team are not as knowledgeable or don't know enough to be able to be successful in a project. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll hire us to come in and do some training, some initial training of best practices and lessons learned and that sort of thing. So there's a lot that you can do along those lines to address it. So oftentimes it helps to have a third party do it, because then it's less of a threat, because it's not like, you're not caught up in the internal politics. If you're my boss, Darian, and I tell you don't know what you're talking about and you don't know a lot about ERP, that's probably going to be a career limiting move to some degree on my part. So it'd be a lot easier if I had someone else from the outside that comes in that has no vested interest in the politics and the internal dynamics. So that's probably the best way. And I think it's also, it's not a personal thing. It's just recognizing that, hey, this organization, not individuals necessarily in the organization, it's more this organization, this team doesn't have quite the level of experience that we need to be successful. So that's why you bring in outside people. So, I think that's probably the big thing. And then also, I think the other dimension of that is asking a lot of questions, understanding what the team wants to get out of the project and what their expectations are, and sort of working through it that way. That's another way to overcome some of that lack of knowledge or understanding.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's super interesting. But kind of circling back to our first question of the day, our newsworthy topics are both related to software vendors today. So we have Oracle and SAP, and I'm really excited to get into these two articles.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how Oracle is pressuring customers to update their licensing agreements, which Oracle has a reputation for that at times. We're going to talk about some news or a new article that's been recently released on that topic. And then we'll talk about SAP SuccessFactors and some of the new capabilities that they've recently announced. And then later in the show, we're going to talk about software integration, the whole integration work stream of ERP implementations and digital transformations. We're going to have an interview with Mark Simon from a company called Celigo on the show to talk about that. And then we'll also talk later, after Mark is on the show, we'll talk about why change management is overrated. So we've got a lot more to cover. Stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 174. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of the show every week at transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformations throughout the world. So thank you for being here today. Darian, we've got a couple really interesting newsworthy items here today involving both SAP and Oracle. What have you got in store for us?
Yeah, so this first article was published by The Register, and they stated that Oracle is using software audits to pressure customers into renewing their unlimited licensing agreements, instead of certifying their usage and moving to perpetual licenses. ULAs allow unlimited use of specific Oracle products, but Oracle prefers renewals for higher revenue. What advice, Eric, would you offer to businesses that are maybe feeling some pressure from Oracle or going through these experiences where maybe they don't necessarily want to renew?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it starts early on before you ever get involved or too far involved with Oracle. You have to make sure you read the fine print and understand what you're signing up for during the contract review process. And that's why it's so important to have experts that not only do consulting and understand how to interact with vendors. Companies like us at our team, we help clients with negotiation processes from a consulting perspective. And then there's also the legal perspective too. You need an attorney that knows how to watch for some of these pitfalls and risks from a legal perspective. And that's why you want to find an attorney that knows this stuff really well, that deals with software contracts very regularly, and we have contacts we can put you in touch with if you're looking for legal counsel on that front, and we can certainly talk to you about how to approach the negotiations from a consulting perspective. That's something we can help with. So it starts with contracts. If you can get the contracts right and negotiate and understand what you're getting into in the contracts, because what happens is most customers, from what I understand, they've agreed to those audits. And it may sound innocuous at the time until they come and audit and say, okay, you're using the software more than you originally signed up for, so therefore we're gonna charge you more. Or what also happens is a lot of times software vendors like Oracle will have in the contracts they'll have a URL, like a link to a page that has all the terms and conditions, but it also says that Oracle has the unilateral right to change those terms and conditions at any time, and you've agreed to those sort of in advance. So you just have to be aware of that, and that's one of the pitfalls I know attorneys that know this space really well will advise you against and advise you on. So you want to make sure you understand all that. But the other option too, or the other thing is that, if you can get out of your contract and that's an option, then look at other software vendors. I mean, in some cases, we've had clients who love Oracle. They love the product. They love the company. We've had others that don't like the way Oracle operates, and therefore they use this as an opportunity, or this pressure from Oracle. They use that as an opportunity to go look for other options or other vendors in the marketplace. So easier said than done, of course, but those are some of the tidbits of advice I'd give to you.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And for clients that maybe are going through this process right now that are looking for another and trying to get out of their contract and looking for another software, how would you suggest that they avoid kind of a situation like this in the future? Do other softwares have this same kind of issues, or is it just specific to Oracle?
I'd say, this is a total subjective comment, but I would say just based on my experience, it seems like Oracle has more of a reputation for sort of strong-arming their customers. And this goes way back to, I remember like 20 years ago when we had Oracle customers that were using on-prem versions of Oracle EBS or whatever legacy version they were using, and they would have usage audits, basically saying, okay, well, you have X number of licensees, concurrent licensees, but you've been using more than that, so we're going to charge you a bunch of money for it. Or Oracle used to have a lot of really kludgy, they'd call it like enterprise pricing, which is basically the more your SG&A costs go up or your revenue goes up, you pay more to Oracle. So instead of tying it to software usage or just the use of the software, they were actually tying it to the metrics, the performance of the business. So it was kind of weird because it was like the better the company does, the more they pay Oracle, even if Oracle, the software, had little to do with the success of the company. So you just have to know what you're signing up for. I think that's the big thing. A lot of customers sort of blindly assume that, we're buying software. How hard can it be? Let's just sign on the bottom line. And they don't go through a rigorous review and negotiation process. And if you're a big company, I would say you should absolutely, push back pretty hard. If you're a smaller or mid-sized company, that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult if you're dealing with a really big vendor. And that's why sometimes it's good for the small and mid-market to look at smaller vendors because you have more leverage against them. You can usually get more of a response and more attention from those smaller vendors. So you just have to know what you're getting into. And to answer your question, though, I think Oracle has a reputation that is not quantitative. There's no data to support this, but the reputation and the perception in the space, I would say, is that Oracle has a reputation for being on the extreme side of customer audits and sort of strong-arming their customers into paying more.
Super interesting. That's always good to know, especially for any organizations that are looking to purchase a software. It's always good to know what you're signing up for, like you're talking about. But to kind of switch gears here and go to a different software, we're going to talk about SAP Success Factors in the first half of 2024 and how they released over 250 new features and enhancements. So one of their notable updates, which a lot of softwares have been adding, is AI-driven improvements, such as creating job descriptions, matching applicant skills with job requisitions, and providing personalized opportunities with Opportunity Marketplace. As a CEO with hiring experience, how do you view AI enhancements in the recruiting and hiring space?
Well, I have to say I love AI for some of the parts of HR that I don't really enjoy, like writing job descriptions. That's one of my least favorite things to do, and I use AI frequently to do that here at Third Stage. It's been a lifesaver for me and saved a lot of heartache for me personally. But I think AI, you think about all the different use cases for AI. I think AI could actually work really well in not just HR, but recruiting, like you said, identifying, summarizing a candidate's skill set or summarizing their background or identifying which ones meet the criteria that you're looking for. I think the thing you have to be careful with, though, is it's AI, I don't think, is going to be smart enough yet to identify good cultural fit or maybe identifying, nuggets that are sort of buried, potential rising stars that don't on paper look like they're going to be great, but maybe they are. Maybe they've got some other skill sets that would make them potentially great. So I think it might work pretty well now for sort of your traditional hiring where they need to meet these, that it's going to be good yet at identifying people that don't meet the checklist of requirements, but they have other skills that might be transferable and that sort of thing. So that's speculation at this point. Maybe there is AI out there that can do that. I haven't seen it yet, though. So I'll be curious to see if it evolves or how it evolves to address that need as well.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting point, because I know one thing you always talk about is how important it is to hire maybe not the person with the most experience in the room, but maybe the person that is just going to be a better fit and a go-getter in this industry specifically. AI wouldn't be able to identify that, and maybe they'd weed those people out too early. So that's maybe something that customers that would use SAP's feature of this would have to be aware of if that's what they're looking for while hiring. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's also controversy or discussion in the industry about unintended biases that AI might have, as it relates to demographic biases based on race or sex or religion, that sort of thing. So, you have to make sure that AI doesn't bias itself based on how someone writes their resume or that sort of thing. So that's where humans still have to sort of come in and augment what AI does.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's exciting to see these improvements, and exciting to see software starting to implement things like this into their AI and into their software that customers can then use. But just knowing maybe some of the cons that can go with that, and being aware of what can affect your business in a bad way if you use it wrong is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm really excited to hear from our guest today, who has never been on the show before. So I think he has some great things, and we can learn from him a lot today.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been on his podcast, but he's never been on our podcast. So I'm looking forward to have him on as well. It's Mark Simon from a company called Celigo. And we're going to be talking about software integration in ERP implementations and how to navigate the whole work stream of integration as it relates to ERP. And then we're also going to get into why change management is overrated. After Mark's on the show, we're going to talk about why change management is overrated. We're going to let him leave because that might get a little spicy, the controversy over whether or not change management is overrated. So just you and I will handle that part of the discussion later, but look forward to that one as well. So stick around. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have Mark on the show, but we'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown, Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
These things take time, mom and dad, they have a good life. But what am I gonna do with mine?
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 174. My name is Eric Kimberly, here with Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. And Third Stage is the company that we work for, and I'm the CEO of that company. Is an independent digital transformation consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journey. So thank you for being here today. Excited for this next topic we're going to get into. I don't know that we've ever covered this topic. We may have it. If so, it's been a long time since we have, but it's the whole topic of software integration we talk about a lot of stuff on the show around strategy and change management, program management, and even different types of technologies. But I don't remember ever talking about the role of integration, or just the sort of the discipline of software integration. And it's a very necessary part of any sort of digital transformation. Even if you're including or assuming you're going to have a single ERP system, you still have to think about integration and architecture and data and all that stuff that goes along with it. So that all being said, we thought it'd be great to have this topic here today with Mark Simon, who is the head of strategy at a company called Celigo. So, Mark, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Eric. It's a really pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here and talk to you again.
Absolutely. You had me on your podcast, and so it was only fair that I put you in the hot seat and ask you a bunch of questions as well. I'd sort of return the favor, if you will. So thank you for being here today. But before we get started, just tell us a little bit about you, if you don't mind, about you and Celigo, what you do at Celigo, all that good stuff.
Sure, you bet. My name is Mark Simon. I'm the Vice President of Strategy at Celigo. And first, a little bit about Celigo. We're an integration platform as a service. So what was, traditionally, some people might have called middleware. So we really specialize in integrating applications. So moving data between applications, but it can be API to API integration, but it also can be flat file, B2B, API management, really moving that data and that as a foundation. And we really think of ourselves as an automation platform. So because integration really is the foundation of automation. Personally, now my background personally, I originally started out my career as actually as a software engineer, writing a lot of code back in I think of it now as the Wild West days of the internet back in the late 90s, built, focused really on a lot of e-commerce initially, and really saw then the value and the power of integration. I was on the founding team and CTO of an e-commerce company where we actually took an automation first approach. So it just seemed like the thing to do at the time. We didn't leverage a bunch of fancy tools, but we did, in a really scrappy way, build a lot of tools to automate an organization from the ground up as it scaled from zero, really, and saw the power of that. So then when I left the e-commerce company, I got into consulting and spent a little bit over a decade, and most of that in consulting, for a boutique consulting firm based in Seattle, Washington. And we focused on mid-market digital transformation with ERP implementation at its core, as well as custom software development. So I led the professional services practice most of the time there, and I got a chance to see up front about 500 clients over the years that we performed the core ERP implementation. But it really wasn't just the ERP. It's, ERP is that center of that digital transformation, that starting point for so many companies. So the ERP implementation, the extended integration around that to make the systems link together, and then custom development to either customize the ERP or to build custom business application features outside of that to really provide the business solution clients were looking for. And then from that experience, after we were acquired, I wanted to get into the software action, so to speak. So I joined Celigo when we were about 11 million ARR almost 6 years ago, and I've been with the company again as we've grown tremendously, and now we're over 700 people at this point, and we've got 5,000 customers. So I get a chance to kind of see. I've seen all these things. What you talk a lot about from digital transformation. I've really been at the center of digital transformation from about 3 different perspectives at this point.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting that you started off with more of that technical background and then sort of shifted into full on strategy. Now, what does that role entail? Like when you head up strategy at Celigo, like what's some of the stuff you do in that role, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, great question. Well, in some ways, while there's been a focus, for the last 2.5, 3 years, mostly on our go-to-market motion and focusing on our movements, both upstream, because Celigo as an iPass has been focused on, really came out of, it's fair to say, the lower half of the mid-market, and we're we're also coming out of, we started in the NetSuite ecosystem from an ERP perspective. So many people know us as a NetSuite focused iPass. That's really not, we're very good at it, and we are the most successful iPass in the NetSuite ecosystem. We're also very capable across other ERP ecosystems and in more diverse lines of business beyond just order to cash and quote to cash, where a lot of companies have traditionally started with us. So I spent a lot of my time focusing on that transition upstream and broadening. And I really get to work across all the departments in the organization as an overlay to that end. So I get to see, a lot of things, and in essence get to kind of just roll up my sleeves and get in and solve problems wherever they are in the organization and in the customer journey, leveraging my background. And that for me is a lot of fun, because I still think of myself, essentially as a problem solver that merges technology and business.
Yeah, very cool. That's awesome. And you and I met. Well, first of all, I came across Celigo at a NetSuite conference. I didn't know who you guys were, and then I got to know you guys through at a NetSuite conference, and then you had me on your podcast, which was a really good discussion. And I have to say, just as a side note, you're one of the best podcast hosts. I know you're not a professional podcaster, but your questions were so good. I thought you were very good at asking questions and being thoughtful about the stuff you asked. But tell us a little bit about this podcast that you host. What's it called? What's it about? All that good stuff.
Well, first, thank you, Eric. I appreciate the compliment. Well, it's easy having you on our podcast, simply because there's so much overlap between our backgrounds and where I've been focused, where you're focused. There's just, we could talk for days about, what we've seen in the intersection between our different perspectives on what we see in industry. But we host a podcast here. It's called the Technology Leaders Podcast. And we really just try to focus on that intersection of business and technology. And it's specifically focused on integration and automation, a lot around the mid-market and up into enterprise, but really trying to give, out in industry, there's a lot of business leaders that are technology leaders, and technology leaders that are transitioning into being business leaders. And we see a lot of that in companies that we work that are really at the forefront, that are embarking on digital transformation. So really try to bring those perspectives on automation, integration, and some insight on trends and what's happening out there to help them really succeed in their roles.
Gotcha. Yeah. So with all the guests you've interviewed recently, are there a couple nuggets, or maybe one or two nuggets of findings or learnings or things you've learned from interviewing some of the guests you've talked to recently?
Oh, definitely. That's one of the things I really love about hosting the podcast is just the interesting people that I get to talk to that I wouldn't have, bumped into. My co-host, Jordan Tenenbaum, he does a great job of finding some interesting things and kind of sometimes pushing the limits. Like, okay, how is that related? Okay, we get in and we find, and ultimately find really, really interesting synergies and connections. But the one theme that we've had, and I think we started this, a little bit over a year ago, and probably the most reoccurring theme that gets brought up is the topic of AI, because it's been so in the pot, it's leveled up as far as popularity in just the thinking of everyone, whether you're a technologist or not. And because the public has become so aware, it's just a normal, it comes up very often, but the theme behind that is more, okay, well, how to apply it, and how and why are businesses struggling to apply AI? What do they need to do? Why isn't it being adopted more broadly? Why isn't it maybe having the impact at a business level, especially outside of enterprise, that we expected and hope it would have? And I think that's probably one of the biggest themes beyond just the core, how to integrate and automate your business more successfully.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to have any of these conversations without somehow touching on AI. So just getting into the topic at hand and really setting the context for follow-up questions that myself and the audience might have. And by the way, audience questions, we're welcoming any questions you might have. So please chime in at any point. And if you don't mind, in the meantime, just drop in the chat what city and country you're joining from, just so we have a sense of where you all are here today. But as we get into the topic at hand here, we're going to talk about platform as a service and how it relates to ERP implementations. But before we dive into that, just maybe help us understand and get some high-level understanding of what is integration platform? Or first of all, let's start with platform as a service. I've heard both terms: platform as a service, integration platform as a service, or PaaS and iPass. Can you just help us unpack that a bit? Help us understand what that all means.
Yeah, so there's certainly a lot of solutions out there that are orienting themselves as platform as a service. So typically in this move to software as a service, it is a large number of those software applications really think of themselves as more broader based platforms that they're orienting their customers around, giving them a tool set as a platform in order to enable accomplishment of a function or often several functions. So that platform as a service, almost always a multi-tenant, or very often a multi-tenant cloud-hosted application. And then more specifically, beyond that, a subset of that is that integration platform as a service. So a multi-tenant cloud-hosted platform to integrate your applications, move the data between one or more applications in your organization, or sometimes often between your organizations and partners or customers, between third parties. And so at Celigo, we're at iPass, and we really think of ourselves kind of as the first of the next generation, the iPass 2.0, if you will.
Okay, hold that thought, Mark. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I've got a lot more questions for you, but first we'll take that break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
With 1,000 lives.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 174. My name is Eric Kimberly, here with Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Mark Simon, and we're talking about software integration in ERP implementations. When we back up here, and you mentioned that you started, in the space in the late 90s. It's the same time I started out. I know back at that time, this whole concept of best of breed and platforms and integration, it was almost a bad word and something that is sort of a necessary evil. Like, oh man, we've got to get some middleware. And it's just sort of like, if we can avoid it, let's avoid it. And let's just find, a single ERP system or whatever. How has that changed, in recent years? Or has it changed, I guess, to start? Do you think it has changed?
How has this? Well, it's definitely integration is evolved a great deal, and I think of it a little bit in parallels to how ERP has evolved over the same period of time. But I think integration's been a step or two behind the ERP evolution over the same period. So, and when I started out that same, when you did, Eric, integration was, very often, the majority of the time it was still being done, by hand, hand coding. A very technical team of developers was hand coding with their language of choice, integrate code to move and transform that data between applications. And now at the time, middleware, as it was commonly called, that was really a realm for the most part of enterprises in only some enterprises. And so there really wasn't a lot of options. Microsoft was starting to dabble in some. There were some tools. You had concepts like Informatica and BizTalk were there, but it was especially for smaller companies or faster moving companies, it was really everything was hand coded throughout almost all industries to a large extent. And then that started to evolve as really think of it as the first generation of iPass players came on the scene. And that's like, think of MuleSoft and then into Boomi. Those are both two examples of that first gen of iPass. And they were really very oriented. So that was typically, those solutions were also very often deployed on-prem. They weren't necessarily, especially those first generations, not cloud deployments. And those are very developer-centric tools. So they're oriented towards providing a better toolkit for building integrations, but they're oriented for developers both to design and build their integrations, but also to manage them. And so as iPass progressed with Celigo, the intent here was to move integration, the build and the management, make it more less developer centric and more oriented towards a business user. We really target, for example, trying to target the tech savvy business user, being able to engage, whether it's building an integration or not, but certainly managing it. And that has a lot to do with why and how, what an integration is doing in an organization, and how it's, really acts as a contract between systems when you integrate something, regardless of what you do. And because of that, any change management issues, any endpoint issues, they'll often show up in your integration first. And so an error in integration, for example, is not a technical problem, but it's actually a business process problem. So to manage integration at scale, it's vastly more efficient to be able to pull those business users in, because it lies with those business processes and those systems coming back to being able to resolve those efficiently. And it's a lot more efficient if you can get the business users involved than having this, you think of it as an internal integration development team. Well, that is very, still very common, and we most commonly see, but being able to pair that with the business users more easily provides for a tremendous amount of more flexibility in being able to manage and resolve the integration, just make it more of an efficient process to own that for the organization.
Yeah. It makes total sense. It's super interesting how that's evolved, over the last couple decades. Just turning to the audience here real quickly. I want to say hi to Darian in Denver on LinkedIn, and also a comment here from Meherban on LinkedIn says, "Hi Eric, this is Meherban from Toronto. Loved your book, The Final Countdown. An excellent little overview of BPM and why it's important before selecting software or an SI." So thank you for that. In fact, I just happen to have a copy of that book right here. If anyone wants to buy it, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. And you can also find it on Amazon. Sorry for that shameless plug there in the middle of our conversation, Mark, but had to do it.
But that's good. I just ordered mine 2 days ago, so I was like, I have 200 minutes, so it's coming. So
you have to let me know what you think of it once you get it. And I'll sign it for you next time I see you. But here's a question from Darian on LinkedIn. This is a really good one. I think it's sort of a good segue from what we were just talking about a second ago, Mark. But the question is, are there trade-offs you have to make when going with platform as a service versus monolithic ERP systems? And I think that's a really important point, because I feel like everything you're talking about so far and everything you guys do as a company with Celigo is sort of moving us away potentially, or providing an alternative to monolithic ERP systems, which, the way I would define monolithic ERP systems for those listening that may not have heard that term or just don't know what it means, that's more sort of your standard single one size fits all integration of a full, one single ERP system. Whereas what you're talking about is with Celigo and iPass in general is more of a model to integrate multiple solutions. But so how do you make those, or how would you summarize those trade-offs between platform as a service, monolithic ERP?
Yeah, and this is something that I've definitely seen in that has been represented in that evolution of ERP over the last 15 years. And I think there was this concept originally that your ERP could and should handle all of your business processes. That the ERP is a single ERP will handle, that monolithic ERP is the best solution to all of your business processes. And I think what we've seen is with the proliferation of SaaS applications out there in business. So there's now literally tens of thousands of SaaS applications, all providing some absolutely amazing specialized solutions for your business process. You can go down to something very, very refined, or something as broad as just pick something like Salesforce for your CRM. And so in a lot of cases, you've had these applications become foundational, and they've become the best of breed for a given line of business, for example, whether it's CRM, or maybe for a particular vertical or a subset of accomplishing these tasks. And so departments and organizations, they want to use these tools because they feel like they solve, and they very often do solve, their business problems most efficiently. And so what that's created is this natural pull away from that monolithic ERP, with the concept more of an ERP company adopting an ERP and then adding in these SaaS apps as they go along the way. And you have everything from those really big foundational SaaS applications. Might be like I mentioned, CRM is a great example, and maybe a marketing automation platform, and then maybe your HRIS system, a Workday, something like that. And now you've got 3 or 4 or 5 foundational SaaS applications all around your ERP, but then you get that secondary tier. And I think of in certain SaaS apps have then created their own, I call it the constellation around them, where particularly CRM is a great example. It's anymore, I don't think you necessarily purchase choose Salesforce as your CRM just for Salesforce. You choose it because of the constellation of applications that are there around it that enable you to automate your sales process and make your sales team and your marketing teams more effective. And so with that movement, with adding all of these SaaS apps, and the departments and organizations and down to an individual level are pulling in. This is the rise of everything from, on one spectrum, shadow IT to which the IT leaders everywhere despise, but all the way through very explicit approved purchases of sometimes dozens of SaaS applications just in a single department, residing alongside of the ERP system and the foundational SaaS apps. And what this creates is a very, very powerful business systems environment, but you have to integrate between those systems, or otherwise you're just creating new data silos and you're solving one problem, and you're solving one big problem often in these cases, and creating others. And this is one of the biggest things I've seen, we see as a company talking to business leaders is, and it almost always starts with the ERP implementation, because this is so hard on an organization. I always used to sort of talk to my clients about this as being an ERP implementation is probably the toughest thing their business will go through. Very often. And but then they implement it, they get it up and running, and 6 months, 3 months later, 6 months later is a better check-in, and more of the smoke and the dust is settled by then. But it's like, well, things are better, but they're not quite what they envisioned. And that almost always comes down to a lack of integration. There's not as much integration as there should have been planned in to connect the other system together and really create a single business system, both for employees and, even more importantly, for customer experience, out of all of these SaaS applications. And this is really given because of that shape of how that movement away from that monolithic ERP to this universe of SaaS apps, and we see customers all the time of ours with 100+ SaaS apps quite regularly. And you see really the need to integrate those together. That's how you make that work, and you get those best of breed solutions with integration between them and thoughtful integration, planned integration, and that's how you end up with achieving really the objectives and the business efficiency of that true automation and digital transformation that was the intent all along.
Okay, hold that thought, Mark. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I've got a lot more questions for you, but first we'll take that break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology-agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 174. My name is Eric Kimberly, and here with Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world that are with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Mark Simon, and we're talking about software integration in ERP implementations. So you mentioned Salesforce and NetSuite, and those are two good examples because both of those, especially especially Salesforce, as you mentioned, is more of a constellation, as you put it, which is a great word. You're getting the CRM system, but you're also getting all the third-party apps that have been developed on the Force platform. And NetSuite's starting to do that too, where they've got third-party developers that are creating apps in the NetSuite, built on the NetSuite backbone. So even in those cases, even when you've got, call it a single vendor, but you've got multiple apps that were built within that platform, even then you still need to think about integration and how you're going to tie those systems together. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because not all those apps in that constellation are natively built into the platform. Sometimes they are, and when that works and that meets the needs, that's fantastic, and that's one option. But a lot of the best applications for solving those problems sit outside, and they sit outside. And to be successful in those ecosystems, they very often have to provide what we call native integration to the core ERP they're working with, whether they sit in, say, the NetSuite ecosystem or the Microsoft Business Central or SAP. Those applications need to integrate in, but that those native integrations often work at the beginning for more simple needs, but growing companies often move. They grow past what those native integrations can do at some point, and they're limited by them, and they need to then move on to building their own integrations, or shutting down, if they can, parts of the native integration, and then moving to integration that meets their needs more specifically. And I see this very, very, very commonly. Worked great to get started going, the company grows, and they're like, oh, well, we can't do this, or we can't implement the process like that. And you're like, well, why? And it's, the integration to X doesn't support that. And you're like, well, that can be solved, right? Use a modern tool, solve that. Don't let your tools dictate your business processes when there's a competitive advantage to having a different business process.
Yeah. It's easy for a lot of software vendors to say, don't worry about that different business process or competitive advantage you have, because you could just use our software, just do it the way it was built. And the last thing you want to do is water down whatever advantage you have in the market. That makes total sense. So I think it's safe to say that nowadays, best of breed and multiple applications it's not a bad word anymore like it used to be. And in many cases, it's a necessity. I mean, even if a company wants to go full on single integrated ERP, which I'll admit, a lot of our clients say, hey, let's find a single platform. Let's put just one system, which in a perfect world, that's great. I mean, if you can find that, I'd say have at it and do that. The problem is this is not a perfect world. And usually you might get 70 or 80% of the way there and find that, wow, there's that last 20% or whatever it is that doesn't fit. Our ERP system doesn't quite fit. Doesn't mean you abandon the ERP system, but now you've got to figure out, what am I going to do about that other 20%? Do I go out and find a best of breed solution? Do I find an app that's built within the constellation, as you put it, especially if I'm using Salesforce, NetSuite, Oracle Fusion starting to do the same thing? I think Workday is starting to do it too. A lot of these
Exactly.
a lot of these software vendors are providing that sort of ecosystem or constellation that people can build third-party apps. So you can go out there and find whatever it is you want, and then obviously use tools like iPass to integrate it. But how have you seen, clients manage some of the challenges that go along with that? So now, instead of one single ERP system, we might have, say, 5 systems. We've got a core ERP, and then we've got 4 other main operational systems we've got to sort of bolt onto that. What's some advice you have for customers, or how have you seen customers navigate the technical complexity and the fact that now you're managing multiple systems? You've got to manage data integration, the architecture, all that stuff. What's some advice there?
Yeah, I think the biggest advice there is to adopt what we call an automation first mentality. So very often integration and automation are thought of, they come in, they're brought in as a band-aid. Hey, we're going to buy these apps, and they think about sort of like very, very obvious, absolutely critical integration, which is where you have to start. But they don't really think about the integration and automation from a full business process perspective. So they get those things up and running, launched, and then they start to be, then they can focus on the second order pain points or issues that are coming up, data integrity problems, inefficiencies, manually, their team being forced to manually move data between these systems. And then they start automating in a very reactionary fashion. And then if you couple that with using, say, legacy tools or no tools, back to that hand coding of integration, which we still see an absolute ton of out there in industry. Well, that's now, you can't, an organization, nobody has unlimited resources. And so they can't possibly keep up with the pace of change with the new SaaS apps, the changing, the business process evolving. And so that's very often done in a centralized IT model, and centralized IT there then ends up being very much behind the curve. So very reactionary, never automated enough, always kind of doing, coming in, having to come in later to sort of constantly put out like integration fires and automation fires. And what we see is that shift to that automation first mentality will smooth that out dramatically. Every time you're changing or adding a new app, being like, okay, how can we automate all of this? How can we automate this being plugged in? And just thinking that through a little bit more and posing that question. And we see that mindset really shift to proactive automation around that, starting with integration at its core. And that leads to companies really digitally transforming faster and dramatically faster than their peers who are more reactionary.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now, what about those that think that, well, if I'm a CIO and I'm leading a digital transformation, let's say, I might think, well, everything you just described, Mark, that sounds to me like a symptom of people not wanting to change. So what I mean by that is, instead of putting in a new system, one single system that standardizes everything on a common platform, now you've got maybe a more decentralized approach where you've got, sales is out finding their own CRM system, HR is out there, using their own HR technologies. And so you're sort of allowing the masses to find the technologies that work best for them, but not necessarily looking at the one single integrated platform. So what would you say to people that say, hey, that sounds like just an excuse to resist change or to, not take more of a holistic approach to their digital transformation?
Well, and I think that's a great question. And what's necessary is to have IT and those business units working together. I think that's the biggest issue that I've seen in organizations where they're feeling like the departments feel like they're working against IT. IT's working against them all the time or holding them back. And but they have to work together because there has to be this central vision on accomplishing the digital transformation and working efficiently and moving in a coherent direction with oversight. But also the departments need to have input on what works best for them and how their business processes need to evolve and they're going to be the experts on their areas of the business and what's happening. And it's when IT and those business teams really team up together and mesh together in more, we often think of it from an integration standpoint as concept of federated integration. From an integration standpoint where IT is overseeing and managing the integration, but the line of business, the departments are often engaged. Their teams are often get an opportunity with oversight to build their own integrations, to manage them, to be more involved. And that federated concept, those working together, so that you have mission critical decisions and the broader range visionary planning happening from IT leadership, but meshing with the departments. That's really, that federated concept is where we see it working, by far the most efficiently. And those companies simply, they grow faster and they digitally transform at a higher pace.
Right. Yeah. And I think, what you're describing here is a way to find what I think is a nice balance between, like you said, having IT working with the business, and you can still have this sort of more of a decentralized best of breed approach, whatever you want to call it, but you can also do it in a more strategic, holistic, even though I hate that word holistic. I think most people do. But you can look at it from a big picture perspective of like the entire enterprise. What are our different applications we're going to use in different parts of the enterprise? We might let, certain divisions or departments use their own technologies that fits best for them, but we're going to have a sort of a strategic overarching view of how we tie it all together and how data flows and what the architecture is going to look like and all that stuff. And that's where iPass comes in. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect assessment. Exactly. You have to have that oversight and that greater vision on how this is strategically going to tie together. And one of the things I think it's very important in that process from a technology leadership standpoint is always challenging business units. teams, because you can go too far in one direction in this new direction, and teams can adopt too many SaaS applications. They can adopt too many point applications without a plan to have them integrate, and organizations can end up with a lot of overlap within a single department and across the organization. So you always have to be asking, okay, does this make sense to adopt this? Oh, you have a need, but does this make sense? And then conversely, are those things, using those applications, is that in line with the ideal business process? And this is always, I always saw this as the crux of any business systems implementation is, are you customizing the system to your business, or are you going to adopt best practices that are come closer to out of the box, out of the systems that you're acquiring? And that, I think, is always has to be, you always have to have this very sort of, challenger mentality around this. And I think that's what IT can help bring. Hey, are we thinking about this the right way? Should we adopt a new application? Is this better? Are we better off maybe using the core ERP and adopting a more best of breed? Or is there a clear strategic advantage for us as a business to do something different? Okay, then if the clear answer is yes, then you should invest there. And I think that there needs to be a push and pull there, and a little tension in the business all the time to create the right outcome.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Here's another question from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian asks, are there some pros and cons organizations need to consider with public PaaS versus private versus hybrid? And maybe I'll just sort of back up for a second. In the world of software as a service, you have, or I should say in the world of cloud, you have private cloud, you have public cloud, and then obviously you've got on-premise, which is not cloud, but there's sort of the three options there. And then there's the hybrid option as well. Does that also apply to platform as a service, or is it all sort of that SaaS model, if you will?
That definitely applies to platforms as a service as well. Definitely. There's those trade-offs with those where more of a public PaaS model where you've got multi-tenant applications natively built for the cloud. Those applications typically can be more cost disruptive. They can provide more value because they're able to deploy more efficiently into their infrastructure. And then conversely, it's another added layer of complexity to be able to, and the costs go up to deploy those in a private cloud, or still be able to do that in some type of on-prem capacity, or a hybrid model. And those are all, that always increases the complexity of managing it, deploying it, owning it, and those costs come through whether it's still wrapped in a software as a service bubble and handled by your provider, or now you're having to take those costs on internally. Those costs are have to be borne somewhere, and so to bear those costs, you have to be just realize that the further you get away from that public platform as a service model, it's just going to get more expensive, but you get more control. You get more control over security, more control over environment, and in certain situations, that's those absolute requirements. We look at government, for example, federal government, the deployments of applications, some healthcare situations. We often see this come up. In those cases, it can be absolutely critical and a requirement. There's not an option, but very often there is an option. It's really always assessing or asking, do we really need to do it that way, or is that what are the pros and cons, and assess that, because we see costs going up dramatically for organizations to kind of hold on to this. Okay, we're going to do cloud, but we have to do private cloud, and sometimes it's really not justified at this point.
Okay, hold that thought, Mark. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I've got a lot more questions for you, but first we'll take that break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say. Tell me, I've been waiting for so long to hear.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 174. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Mark Simon, and we're talking about software integration in ERP implementations. So from a security perspective, I mean, how does, when we look at iPass and this whole sort of best of breed model and platform as a service in general, how does that affect security? Because I know a lot of times when there's a security breach or systems get hacked, it's oftentimes not the core ERP or the core operational system. Oftentimes it's one of the third-party apps that's been integrated, and there's some sort of backdoor that hackers get into, and then that gets them access to the full, integrated suite of applications or the data within it. How does iPass and best of breed, does that create more vulnerabilities? If so, how do we overcome that? What do we do from a cybersecurity perspective?
Yeah, I think that approach definitely increases, the best of breed approach certainly increases the security risk. You have more points of entry, and now we're moving more data between these solutions, very often SaaS solutions in the public cloud. And so it does create more risk and opportunity for attack. And that's why we've certainly in the integration space, we've seen the awareness of security and the investment in security and management of security around SaaS applications increased dramatically over the last several years. Because that really has to be at the forefront. There's a lot of business value, tremendous business value to be gained from adopting these applications, but only if you conduct your due diligence around security. And I've had an opportunity to work very, very closely with our security team as we've grown as an organization here. And it's very interesting to work with them to assess SaaS vendors and see what's out there. You have to be assessing security of SaaS applications when you purchase them, and be looking at them, go in with you fully aware of the risks you're taking on. Are they a permanent data store? What data is going there? What's your risk profile around that data? What are they doing? Are they SOC 2 compliant? Have they been SOC 2 certified and are audited? Any of the other numerous certification regimes that you may need to fall under as an organization. You have to be assessing your SaaS apps, and this is one of the greatest risks I see with rapidly growing organizations that are adding in very quickly and adopting new SaaS applications that they often get in front of. They get out ahead of their security, and so it's critical that you have the right balance between moving quickly and adopting that new technology, but also making sure that each one of those touch points is secure, and that you're leveraging a platform, a solid, secure platform for that integration. And that is one of the areas that we see as an attack vector often is some of these homegrown integration approaches to solving problems is it's just not anywhere near as secure as an integration platform as a service for moving that data.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So something, it's like you mentioned earlier, you made a comment that really resonated. It's sort of like you just have to assess pros and cons. I'm paraphrasing something you said, but it's sort of like this is all about trade-offs. It's all about risk, and no matter what you do, even if you go with a single ERP system, that creates another set of risks that maybe you've shored up the entry points from a cybersecurity perspective. Let's just say, so great, you've mitigated that risk now because you've got one system. Doesn't completely mitigate it, but at least you've reduced the risk. But now you've created other issues because now you've got a single system, and that puts more pressure on the organization to change. And so now maybe you've shifted the risk from more of a cybersecurity or a technical complexity perspective. Now you're just shifting it to more of a change and an operational risk because now you're forcing more change on the organization potentially. So I think that's a good point. You've just all of this stuff we're talking about involves risk. We just have to assess the risk and figure out which risk profile and scenario best fits what we're looking for.
Exactly. And you have to assess that individually around a given solution and an area of business process in the organization. Some cases it's worth taking on what potentially looks like more risk and investing in mitigating that risk and managing it. And in other cases, it doesn't. And you slide your tolerance for risk in the other direction. I think that's really the key thing for modern IT organizations and security leaders to look at that and be like, okay, well, what are the business needs? Where can we gain business advantage by taking on more security risk and mitigating it in other ways versus, okay, this isn't going to gain us much here. That's a continual balance.
Right. Now, I have two questions at the same time I wanted to ask you. I should probably just pick one, right? Here's one from Third Stage, from LinkedIn that I'll start with. Is PASS able to change or scale up and down as an organization changes? So as an organization grows, they evolve, you acquire new companies, you enter new markets, whatever, you change. Is iPass able to, how does that work as far as scaling up and down?
Yeah, so by leveraging an iPass solution, you're able to scale up and down much more efficiently from an integration standpoint. So you're able to, say you've gone to market, and we see this very often. We have a ton of our customers that are often product-based companies, and they're the very first point where after they implement their ERP, the immediate step at the same time to go live is to integrate their primary sales channels. So that might be e-commerce sites, that might be Amazon, that might be sales channels, multiple of those, and often doing this as testing the market, so to speak. So whether it's a large organization and this is the first time they're selling direct to consumer, or maybe they're still doing B2B sales, but they're conducting it in a more web-oriented manner. There's a lot of approaches. In what can often happen, and this is fantastic when it does, is that those sales channels can take off, something can hit, and those can be sometimes very, very successful and unexpectedly. And the organizations that are leveraging iPass for the integration for those now have a much more scalable architecture to scale up when maybe order volume increases by 10x or 100x or 1,000x. And we see that with our customers and our platform. And that's one of the benefits of leveraging our approach as a multi-tenant SaaS application, as that no individual customer impacts the load at all. Once you reach a certain scale of ours where we have thousands of customers, so you could scale up to as long as your applications support it. And this is where organizations often have the most problem, is something might scale up at one point. So maybe your orders increase by 100x in a day. Well, the iPass can handle it, scale up often without even touching anything, without even tuning anything, and handle that. But you've also got to make sure that you're thinking about the destination of this data. Can you get that data into your ERP? Does your architecture and configuration and implementation within the ERP say allow that data to get in? Does your does the way that you've mapped your data flow with your 3PLs and back, and especially in multi-channel commerce, how does your strategy allow for this to keep inventory up to date? Your multi-channel inventory allocation, is this going to work if you presented with an opportunity to scale? So just because so iPass scales, yes, but you've got to think about this. Okay, I've got apps that can scale, more apps that can scale as part of my system deployment, but make sure that everything else can, and you've thought that through, because you're only going to be able to scale as much as your weakest link there.
Okay, hold that thought, Mark. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I've got a lot more questions for you, but first we'll take that break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Could you whisper in my...
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
Yes, I'll do anything you ever dreamed to be complete. Yes, I'm nothing, that's all.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 174. My name is Eric Kimberly, here with Darian Fiakuski. You can find new episodes of this show every week by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world that are with their digital transformation journeys. I'm here with Mark Simon, and we're talking about software integration in ERP implementations. It's hard. I tried to get through the conversation without bringing up AI again, but I couldn't help myself. So AI,
we almost did it.
we almost did it. You mentioned it earlier, and it sort of stuck in my head, and I had to come back to it. But so AI, let's talk about that for a second. How is AI and sort of the all these different software applications are obviously investing very heavily in artificial intelligence and building AI capabilities in their technologies, which is in many ways showcasing or underscoring the importance of data and how, because a good AI model only works as good as the data going into it. So how is data or is artificial intelligence impacting what you guys do and what this world of iPass and best of breed in general?
Well, it is, in that it is bringing a new focus, and it's raising the awareness around and the prioritization of integration and automation within organizations. So AI is just another tool in the automation toolbox. Now, it's an exciting, very flashy one. And it does, there's a lot of very interesting things in it, in sort of, out of the box, with proper oversight, the generative AI tools and large language models can be used to assist any number of employees doing their normal everyday jobs. But to really get that deeper value from AI solutions, it requires having a solid base of data. So you're going to get the most value not by allowing your employees to use ChatGPT or even going as far as building custom GPTs for your organization, but taking it multiple steps further and connecting to get and leveraging the power of the AI tools, leveraging OpenAI through API calls, consolidating data across multiple data sources, and then leveraging AI tools to provide you insights, to answer questions more quickly of your employee base, of facilitating getting your customers answers, identifying patterns within your customer data to say head off churn or to optimize customer lifetime value. But all those things are dependent upon data, and that's the foundation. It just comes back to this core, which if you don't have good business processes, you're not going to have accurate enough data to really be able to leverage AI. And what we see, and what I've seen in a lot of cases now is AI solutions kind of being hurriedly slapped on the top of a really poor foundation. And you're basically, and all automation can just can give you garbage output, but AI-based automation can give you exponentially worse garbage on the other end. So you've got to make sure, okay, you've got a good solid business process foundation. Your data's doesn't have to be perfect, but it's clean enough to get to be able to leverage. And then once those pieces are in place, then you can start to leverage those the AI tools and techniques. And from there, there's some very amazing stuff that can be done. And you don't have to you can often, I see organizations trying to start too big, but it's often best to start really small in a corner of the organization where you know, hey, I've got pretty good data because all this data is generated just in this one SaaS app over here. Okay, I'm going to plug in an AI solution just on that and just start there. And it's something where and then organizations start to see the power of it. Start small, build out, and then accelerate the capabilities of the organization, but especially the employees. We see some fantastic tools. We built some incredible ones internally. We've seen customers do the same, and it's amazing what you can do from an efficiency standpoint. But start small, take steps forward. Start with where you have a good business process and good data, and it'll get you there. Versus, again, this is where I think everyone's struggling. Is that foundation for the AI.
Yeah. And that what you're describing too also seems to support more of that agile approach that a lot of organizations are taking rather than that traditional waterfall. Let's design one big massive system. Like you said, you can start small and you can use iPass as a way to start small, but still tie those small wins back to the bigger picture and the data flow and certainly the AI models that you might be trying to use in your organization.
Exactly.
How do you recommend that organizations and project teams determine if this iPass model is right for them, or at least determine if it's a good option for them? What are some of the criteria you would say, if you're an organization that fits these criteria, then you would definitely want to consider iPass?
At this point, any organization that's growing, that's modernizing, that's going through digital transformation and trying to automate needs an integration platform. That you need to integrate to be a modern organization. Maybe if you're a small static org and you're living on legacy applications that have already been integrated and you're not changing as a business and you're not growing much, well, you could probably stay there and not touch anything. You don't need an iPass, but that's a business that's dying as well. And so any business that is embarking on digital transformation absolutely needs an iPass. It is to have teams internally hand coding integrations or using some of the legacy tools. It's like living in the Stone Age. There are cases where though that's still isolated scenarios where that's still the best approach, but by far for 98% of the companies out there, by far the best approach is to leverage an iPass, and particularly at the inflection point in which you're you're automating. It seems like, okay, when you realize, hey, we're automating the business, we're implementing a new ERP. Whenever you're touching those foundational systems, that is a great point to be thinking about it. But also you can come in from another direction, and really anytime you're struggling with data quality or manual, like, oh, this person is moving this data from this system to this system, or we have these problems because this data doesn't line up. Those are all problems that are solved through better integration, and better integration through an iPass. And so organizations can start at a very small point as well, or with the big initiatives when they're redoing those foundational SaaS apps. You can take either approach, so big or small, but iPass is absolutely the way to go, especially a modern iPass that's going to allow you to, that's going to give power to the development from a development and code-based approach, and give your technical team capabilities, but also leverage those tech-savvy business users. Modern iPass will give you much more power and capability to accelerate that automation in the organization than a more legacy one. And I think that's one of the key things to consider as an organization.
Yeah, that's great advice. Now, how do you recommend that organizations and project teams that do determine that they want to consider potential iPass solutions, or at least consider it as an option for their transformation, how do you recommend they choose the right tool?
That's and this is really important. Is to look again. Make sure you're looking at modern iPass tools. You want to, and you also want to pick. There's a lot of players in the space. There's a lot of new players. A lot of things that solve maybe small sectors of the integration problem, but they don't handle the big ones. So I think one of the number one thing is, what I mentioned earlier, is picking an iPass that's part of iPass 2.0 that's going to give tech savvy business users its access, and so it's not just the developer tools, but you want to make sure you also have development capabilities and the platform can scale. So make sure that you're selecting a true iPass, not just say a task automation tool, but a true iPass that's oriented to move large amounts of data through the platform, that can service both the needs of developers and business users. And then look to make sure that you're working with an iPass that has a vision for the future, that has broader capabilities, because companies often start just at thinking, okay, we just need to integrate here at a small section of the business. But as businesses grow and scale, the need for automation and integration grows exponentially. So just always be thinking about, okay, can this platform handle connecting dozens or hundreds of applications, and take that into account and make sure that you're looking at that and selecting an iPass that'll meet those needs as you grow as well.
Yeah, it's great advice. And how can people learn more about you or connect with you, learn more about Celigo, all that stuff? What's the takeaway here?
Well, a great place to learn about modern iPass solutions, what they can do for your business, is go to celigo.com. That's celigo.com. And check us out on our website, or through LinkedIn. I'm personally on LinkedIn as well, and you can follow me. Also, I'm sharing a lot about iPass and automation, and how to accelerate business. And happy to talk to anyone out there about what we can do to automate your business and help it achieve really the digital transformation objectives.
Right. And then you're on LinkedIn. So what's the best way? Just Mark Simon is your name, and you can search Mark Simon Celigo, and you'll find you there on LinkedIn. So that's another good place to connect to. So, well, thanks for being here today, Mark. Really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot, and appreciate the audience questions as well. So
great. Thanks for the opportunity, Eric. Really appreciate it.
So we've got a lot more to cover here based on our conversation with Mark. It was a great conversation. We're going to follow up on that here in just a moment. And then later in the show, we're also going to talk about why change management is overrated. So be sure to stick around for that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
I'm gonna leave it all out there and I'm gonna leave it all out there.
Hello, and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 174. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Fiakuski. And Darian, we just had Mark on the show when we talked about software integration in ERP implementations. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, I thought Mark was a great guest. I thought we could learn a lot, or the audience could learn a lot from everything he was saying about platform as a service. I thought he brought up some really interesting points and really explained how efficient and like the benefits to platform as a service. But some of the things that we didn't get into were the cons as platform for a service. Could you maybe dive into that a little bit for us? What are some things that people need to be aware of when going with platform as a service?
Yeah, well, one is one that I mentioned in one of my questions to him was around change management and resistance to change. And oftentimes when you have a platform as a service or a best of breed model where you're going to, allow different parts of the organization to identify and deploy their own technologies that make the most sense for them without necessarily considering the needs of the rest of the organization, a lot of times that can be, an enabler of resistance to change. And so on the one hand, these platform as a service tools are great because it provides more flexibility and creates more options. Sometimes that flexibility and increased number of options is just an excuse not to change. In other words, to just do things the way we've always done them because we can. We've got technology, we've got integration tools that allow us to just pave the cow paths and do the same thing that we've done for decades. So that's one thing, is that change resistance can be a little bit more pronounced, I guess you'd say. Although I will say the other extreme is if you go with a single ERP system, that's going to impose a lot of change and disruption to your business, which could also result in a resistance to change. So one might cause more resistance to change. The other one might just enable allow you to continue resisting to change. So both of them have their downsides on that front. And then I'd say the other, in addition to change management or potential resistance to change, the other challenge that I see, the other big negative of platform as a service, or iPass, as Mark refers to it, is that you create a certain amount of technical complexity now. You've got a hodgepodge of different systems and sort of a spaghetti bowl diagram of all your systems and how they tie together. Although I will say iPass and that middle layer can clean up some of that messiness. But you still have to maintain these different technologies now versus having, a single platform. And then I guess a third risk that Mark mentioned, actually, that I'll just reiterate here, is the cybersecurity risk. Because if you have, it's not platform as a service that's a problem. It's the fact that platform as a service is allowing you to have multiple systems. And by having multiple systems, now you've exposed yourself to more potential breaches or cybersecurity risks. So those are some of the major ones. But it just depends on what kind of, what your priorities are, what industry you're in, what your technical maturity is. You have to look at all these different aspects of who you are as an organization, where you're headed. And then you figure out, okay, do those risks make sense, the ones I just described? You might look at that and say, well, that's not a huge deal. We have ways to mitigate that. Or you might say, yeah, that's a really big deal, which is exactly why we don't want a platform as a service or an integrated best-of-breed solution. We want a single platform, a single ERP system. So, I think I can make really strong cases for and against both models for sure. So it depends on your needs.
Right. I feel like every organization, it really just depends on what they need and what will best fit them for what their pros and cons will specifically look like to them. So there's general ones, but then each business has specific ones to their company.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense.
Yeah, definitely. But speaking of change management being a risk, I think it'll be a really good transition into our last topic of today, which is change management is overrated.
Yeah, good. Nice segue. That was really good. I wish I could say I teed it up intentionally that way, but I did not. That was all you. So good transition, and that is what we want to talk about here today. I recently published a video on my YouTube channel where I talk about how change management can sometimes be overrated. Now, to be clear, and just to give a kind of a spoiler alert, I'm not here to suggest that change management is actually a bad thing or that you shouldn't do change management. That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that sometimes change management is overrated. Sometimes change management is done wrong and ineffectively. And that's why, in my opinion, sometimes change management as a discipline gets a bad rap or a bad name. And so that's why I want to expose this here and talk about it in this video, is talking about why and how change management can at times be overrated, and more importantly, what you can do to overcome that and have a change strategy that is not overrated, that it becomes a key part of your transformation. So with that all being said, let's roll this clip of my YouTube channel where I talk about why and how change management can be overrated at times.
We help clients through their digital transformation journeys, including their software selection and digital strategy, as well as their implementations. And when we're helping clients through the implementation stage of their transformations, organizational change management is one of the big things that we help them with. And what we find, and what I've learned through my career, is that oftentimes organizational change management is overrated, or at least it can be overrated. But why is that? Why is change management overrated? Is it overrated? Should it be overrated? Those are the things I want to talk about here in today's video. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our Resource Center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. A first scenario where organizational change management is going to be overrated is that management is not supportive of change. In situations where executives and mid-level management doesn't buy into the change, they don't support it, they don't believe in it, they're not on board with it, they're not walking the talk in addition to talking the talk. When that situation exists, then yes, organizational change management is going to be overrated. It's going to be viewed as a nuisance. It's going to be viewed as something that's highly ineffective because organizational change management, no matter how well it's done, cannot be effective without effective support from management, including the executives of the organization. Now, the good news with this is that even though it's almost impossible for a change initiative to succeed without executive and management involvement, is that if you are part of a change team that's facing these sort of headwinds, there are some things you can start to do to mitigate this specific risk. For example, by doing a stakeholder assessment and doing stakeholder management activities throughout the project, that is a way for us to identify who the different management team members are, the executive team members, the influencers, understand who is supportive of the project and who is not. And once we've identified who is not supportive of the project, we can start to work one-on-one with those executives to understand why they're not. And oftentimes when we go through this exercise, we find that there's typically a good reason why executives or managers are not on board. Maybe they have competing priorities. Maybe they don't have the resources to commit to the project. Maybe they don't fully understand why the change is happening. Maybe they view this as a technology initiative that should be simple and shouldn't involve the human side of change. Whatever the case may be, we need to understand what the sources of resistance are and what is causing executives and managers not to support the project. Once we understand that, then we can create a change strategy to collaborate and work with those executives and management team members to ensure that we get them on board, or at the very least, we neutralize the potential negative impact they might have by not being fully supportive of the project. Another situation where change management is going to be an overrated activity on your digital transformation is when change management happens in an ivory tower. And what I mean by this is there's a certain subset of change practitioners out there that operate in an ivory tower, for lack of a better word. They are change theorists, they're academics. They like to work at the theoretical level, and they don't necessarily like to get down in the details and the weeds of how operations works, how technology works, and how people work. And in order to be an effective change manager, it is extremely important that you understand some of these technicalities and some of these detailed nuances of what an organization does and what an operational model looks like. Now, one of the best things that happened in my career when I was first starting off as a change management consultant is I worked for a partner at one of the big consulting firms that essentially forced me to go get certified in a certain technology. And I did not want to do it. It was the last thing I wanted to do was learn how technology works, learn how to configure software, learn how to customize software. I didn't want to do any of that. I was not a technical consultant. But what I learned and what I quickly learned after that is that by having that technical understanding, even though I wasn't a coder or a developer or someone that did the hands-on work within the technology, I understood how the technology worked, and that made me better at being a good change manager. In addition to that, I was also able to speak the language and learn the operations of each client I worked with that I think made me better at being an effective change management consultant. So if you're going to be effective as a change manager, it's really important that you don't operate in this ivory tower that's removed from the front lines of operations and the front lines of technologies that the organization may be deploying. Another common reason why change management efforts can be overrated is because they're not integrated with other work streams within the overall project. If you're deploying technologies and you're going through a digital transformation, chances are pretty high you have a number of different work streams supporting the project. You have technical work streams, you have process improvement work streams, you have architecture and data, integration, analytics, all kinds of things happening throughout the project that may not seem related to change management, but they very much are. And in order for change management to stick, in order for change management to work within an organization, it has to be integrated with these other work streams. Now, this is difficult because a lot of times technical consultants who are not change managers don't see the value of change management. And so the tricky part of being a change manager is you have to embed yourself and integrate yourself with other work streams so that you're involved
with those decisions around technical design, or involved in decisions around process improvements, or certainly anything that has to do with training or communications, you need to make sure that the overall change management initiative is integrated throughout the rest of the project. If it's not, what's going to end up happening is you're going to have a separate work stream and a separate set of deliverables that don't reflect the realities of what's happening in the core project, and you're going to get misaligned, and you're going to end up with a change effort that's not at all integrated with what's really happening from a technology and operational and process perspective. The other reason why this is so important is because change management is more often than not on the critical path of a project. And for those that don't know, or if you haven't been a project manager, a critical path work stream or a critical path task within a project plan is something that means that if that task gets delayed, the overall project gets delayed. So for example, if you have an 18-month project, a task that takes 1 or 2 days may not push the project out 1 or 2 days because you've got some buffer in there. But if it's on the critical path, it means every day or two that gets delayed on that work stream is going to directly delay the project. And the reason for this is because change management and humans' ability to change quickly is often a lot slower than we would expect. In fact, humans change slower than technology can get deployed typically. So that means that the human change management piece is going to be on the critical path, and we as change managers have to ensure that our change activities fit into the overall implementation plan. And again, it may mean that some of these change activities are going to take longer than the technologists can build, design, and deploy new technologies. So it's really important that you have project management and executives that support change management and recognize the need to integrate the different pieces of change management with other parts of the project. Otherwise, change efforts will indeed be something that's overrated and won't deliver the value you expect within your organization. Another common reason why organizational change management is so overrated throughout digital transformations is because the project team itself doesn't fully understand what the changes are going to be. The project team hasn't taken the time to define the future state business processes in detail. They haven't documented what roles and responsibilities are going to be. They're myopically focused on building technology and rolling technology out to the organization. And that's very different than defining business processes from the start. And we as change managers need to understand what the change impacts are, how people's jobs are going to change, so we can start to collaborate with them and communicate with them and do a two-way discussion around how their jobs are going to change so that they're not surprised when we get to end user training and start to train them on how to use the new technology to do their new jobs. If you think about artificial intelligence and some of the automation tools that are available to us today in enterprise technologies, those impacts to organizations and to people in particular are very extreme. And if we don't clearly define what someone's job is going to look like in the future, it's going to create resistance to change, it's going to create resentment, it's going to create change management problems. So we have to have a clear vision of what the changes are, who's affected, how they're affected, and that ultimately becomes the foundation for our change management strategies in order for it to be successful. If we don't take the time to do that, then change management becomes just an overrated activity that is largely considered a waste of time and money. One of the downsides of being a change manager or part of a change management team is that you oftentimes get blamed when things don't go well from a people perspective, especially when you're in the middle of an implementation and you get resistance to change, or you have people asking questions or doubting the project. Oftentimes it's easy to blame the change managers or the change management team. And this is a very unhealthy dynamic that we often see within organizations, which is why it's important as a change manager and a change management team to set the expectations with your project team and your stakeholders and your executive sponsors that change is difficult and people are going to resist change. Your job as change managers is to address those changes. And of course, we would love to anticipate and proactively address every single possible point of resistance within the organization, but the reality is it's not going to happen. You might hit 90 or 95% of that proactively, but it's that 5% of people that you don't proactively address, or that no matter what you do, they're going to resist the change. And those oftentimes become the loudest voices or the squeakiest wheel in the project. And it's easy to blame the change manager when those voices get so loud or when the wheel gets even squeakier, but it's important to set that expectation as a change manager that this is how change works, and we have to not only proactively address change, but sometimes we have to reactively react to change resistance as well. So if you're in an organization that's just viewing change management as a nice to have, and then people are going to start to point fingers at the change management team when things get messy, and by the way, they will get messy, it always does get messy during a digital transformation,
then that's going to be a problem, and change management will be an overrated function within your digital transformation. So while, yes, it's true, sometimes organizational change management can be overrated, if you manage change appropriately and you get people on board with change management as a discipline, then it is not overrated. In fact, it is highly valuable to an organization. In fact, I would argue that change management is the most important critical success factor for a digital transformation. I hope this has provided you some things to think about and some guidance as you go through your change initiatives. If you'd like to learn more about change management and how to be effective in your change efforts, I encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a report you can download for free on our website, and it shares some of the best practices and lessons we've learned from having helped thousands of organizations throughout the world through their digital transformation from an organizational change management perspective. You can read that paper by scanning the QR code in front of you or by going to the links below.
All right, so that was my clip on why and how change management can be overrated at times. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that too. Do you think change management is overrated? What's your experience been with change management? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. So be sure to drop those in the chat wherever you're listening or watching here today. But we're also going to come back and discuss that exact topic here and sort of build on it and follow up on the thread of, is change management overrated? So be sure to stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
It might be unbelievable, but let's not say so long.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 174. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Fiatkuski. You can find new episodes every week by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So, Darian, we just played this video clip from my YouTube channel about why and how change management can be overrated at times. What did you think of that video, or what were your questions from that?
Yeah, I really like the video. I think it's a really interesting perspective to look at change management from. I know you spoke about the importance of not working from like a quote-unquote ivory tower. Can you provide an example from your own experience where understanding the technical details significantly impacted the success of a change management initiative?
Yeah, I can. In fact, I can think of several that sort of fit the same theme, but there's been multiple times, I'll just say, instead of just picking one example, there's been multiple times where I've been on change management teams, especially early in my career when I was doing more of the hands-on change stuff, where you would have the change team and they saw themselves as the change management people, but not They weren't technical, they weren't operational, they didn't necessarily understand any data analytics and that stuff. And they really view themselves as, I'm just a change person. I understand the human dynamics and dimensions of change. And that's fine. That's the intent of change management. But you can't be effective, in my opinion, if you don't understand technology and operations and all the other stuff that goes with it. So I've had multiple scenarios in my career where you have change management people that just refuse to understand the operations. And for me, like, understanding the operations means you go down to a shop floor or go into a warehouse and you see and talk to people that are doing the work, and you try to understand why things work the way they do and where the gaps are and all that stuff. And I've seen too many change management people that say, well, that's not our thing. We're just here to create some communications, have other people tell us what the changes are, and we'll create all the cool, polished communications and change stuff that goes behind it. But in my opinion, that's sort of very superficial, if you don't have that deep understanding. And it also creates a credibility issue for change management too. If you have people creating these messages and running these change strategies that haven't been out on a shop floor to see how the product is made, or been in the warehouse to see how product is shipped, or sat down with accountants to figure out how they do their period end close every week or whatever. So I think that's what I mean by lack of or too much ivory tower. And I could give you literally dozens, if not more, of examples of what I just described, of people that don't want to go understand the business.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And kind of like building off of that, when people don't understand the business, then you really probably feel more of that resistance even more. If somebody's trying to come in and change things and they don't truly understand what's going on, then that change resistance gets even bigger. Can you discuss the balance between how consultants can be proactive and reactive in their strategies in managing this change resistance specifically?
Yeah, well, I think you just hit one. You just alluded to one directly, which is a proactive way of mitigating resistance to change, which is just simply asking and understanding what people do today. And I think this is a big problem and a big nuance that creates problems in the industry, because we have this mentality that we're focused on the future state, we're putting in new technologies, and all we really care about is what is going to be in the future. We don't care about the past. We don't care about the current state, because we're going to abandon it, or we're going to start over, or put something new in place. And that may be true that you are moving to a future state. We all want to focus on the future, and you absolutely should. But from a people perspective, from an employee perspective, there's a reason they do things the way they do, and a reason they've done things the way they have for however many years or decades. And usually there's some really good reasons in that. Not to say that shouldn't change and that it doesn't need to evolve, but there are good reasons behind it. And when you ignore that or don't dig into it, then people will resist the change, because they're going to assume you don't understand. So if you come to me, Darian, and say, hey, I've got this tool that's going to make your job a lot easier, here's all the great stuff it does, I might at first think, oh, that's pretty cool. I could see how I could use that and make my job easier. But then at some point I'm going to say, but I do this, and this is what I've always done. And, how am I going to connect the dots between what I do now and what you're telling me I'm going to do in the future? And if you don't ask me that, I'm never going to quite get there, because you don't understand where I'm at, and you're not going to get there either. You're not going to help me get there because you don't understand what I'm doing. So it's just a way to reconcile. And I think that's the most proactive thing you could do, is ask those sorts of questions and really understand the current state, so that you can speak the language and springboard into the future state. And then the other thing that you can do to be proactive in your efforts, or your change, overcoming resistance to change, is to do an organizational assessment. So we have a tool set we use that's quantitative and qualitative, that actually measures where the potential pockets of resistance are going to be. And then that gives you more direction and more of a sort of a prescriptive or surgical approach to change management, where you can target it to what exactly the culture is, and what different parts of the organization are grappling with, and you can build a change strategy that's very tailored to that. So those are a couple of things you can do to be proactive in overcoming that resistance to change.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think there's also another side to this, which is the higher level senior management support that needs to come into place as well for change management. Can you share some of the strategies and examples of how to gain and maintain management buy-in for these change initiatives?
Well, the first is to get them engaged and speak their language in terms of strategy, and really, asking them to, in some ways, insisting that they become part of the process of defining what the digital transformation strategy is or the ERP strategy is going to be based on what their strategy is as an organization. So you want to, first of all, speak their language and speak in terms of strategy and connect the project or the digital transformation project to the overarching strategy. And then you also want to involve and include from an involvement perspective and from a governance perspective, make sure you involve and include the executives in making major decisions around what our processes are going to be, how they're going to change, how we're going to structure things. They don't need to be involved in all the day-to-day, obviously, of a project, but they do need to make or at least validate some of these major decisions that every ERP or digital transformation project has. So those are some of the best ways is to, speak their language, involve them early on from a strategy perspective, defining the strategy and roadmap, but then also, involving them and making sure that they're involved throughout the entire implementation in making and or validating some of the decisions that are going to affect the business for years to come.
Yeah, definitely. That's all super interesting. I think that makes a lot of good points on everything change management and everything that you maybe need to know before going into your project for change management.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that, and look forward to diving into more change management stuff in this podcast in the coming weeks, which we always do. So thanks for that feedback and those great follow-up questions, and thank you to the audience for your great questions and involvement here today, and thank you for Mark from Celigo for being our guest here today. I really appreciate that, and thank you everyone for listening. Hope you all have a great week, and remember, you can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. Show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. If you'd like to learn more about the company or discuss how we could help or even just brainstorm ideas related to your project, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is in the links of the show notes or the description fields below. So have a great rest of your day and week, and we will see you next time on Transformation Ground Control. Take care.